Anyway, we have a distinguished panel. Joining us, Kash Patel, former Deputy Director, National Intelligence, former DOD Chief of Staff. He's a former prosecutor himself. And the very distinguished Professor Emeritus Alan Dershowitz from the Harvard Law School and the author of Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. Professor Dershowitz, as always, sir, it's a pleasure. I'm not going to ask you to comment on my riff. It was a political riff. I understand that. But I don't understand the charges. I don't understand if you rule out insurrection, they didn't have anything about breaching the Capitol in there. The rest of this stuff, to this non-lawyer, it just kind of looks to me like they're trying to bust him for the gobbledygook of legal arguments that basically boil down to free speech. And you can't get busted and prosecuted and thrown in jail or shot at for being wrong about free speech. But, Professor Dershowitz, you tell us.
Well, first of all, for a non-lawyer, you do a pretty darn good job of correctly stating the law. So I want to congratulate you. You're absolutely right. This case is all about the First Amendment and the right to be wrong. I was a law clerk back in 1964 when the Supreme Court wrote New York Times versus Sullivan. And basically it said, look, if newspapers get it wrong, if the media gets it wrong, that's still protected by the First Amendment. They have to have actual malice. And that's essentially what's going to have to be proved here. You're going to have to prove that Donald Trump himself subjectively believed that he had lost the election fair and square. But he didn't believe that. He was wrong, but he didn't believe it. And the Supreme Court has said in an opinion by Justice Rehnquist, Chief Justice Rehnquist, under the First Amendment, there's no such thing as a false opinion or a false idea. The response to a false idea is the marketplace of ideas, or Election Day. So you're absolutely right. This is a very, very dangerous indictment, dangerous to the First Amendment and also dangerous to the Sixth Amendment because it directly goes after Trump's lawyers, names them as unindicted co-conspirators without giving their names, but basically says they're criminals for giving him advice as to how to challenge the election. What would they rather do? Go on the street and have protests? The way to challenge elections, come up with an alternate slate of electors, challenge the process, go to court. That's what they did. The judges ruled against them, but that's not a crime.
Interesting. And thank you for that, Professor Dershowitz. You're very kind. Kash Patel, it's great to have you back on the show. We never do you justice because you're a defense and intel expert, but you're also a former prosecutor yourself. And I just want to get your take on the case. You heard Professor Dershowitz. You can agree or disagree or someplace in between. But, Kash, just tell me what you're thinking.
Thanks so much for having me on. I'll probably fall short of the mark of you and the professor, but here's my take on the indictment. Let's look at a couple of the actual charges in this instance. Conspiracy against rights, a Section 241 crime. Larry, do you know what the first sentence of that statute is? If two or more people in disguise on a highway, yes, you heard me. If two or more people in disguise on a highway go about with the intent to interfere with a right, they are guilty of conspiracy of rights. This statute is older than the Espionage Act of 1917, which they basically used to charge Donald Trump in the Florida case. They didn't charge him with possession of classified documents there because they didn't have it. They didn't charge him with insurrection, sedition, or treason here because they don't have it because he's innocent of that. So now they're stretching back to 1900 to charge him with a crime that we use to prosecute people who corrupted society on highways and blocked people's rights to free speech. That is the stretch there. The second charge is the 371 conspiracy. That's our catch-all dry conspiracy, as prosecutors say. They didn't charge him with conspiracy to commit treason, conspiracy to commit insurrection, conspiracy to commit sedition, because Donald Trump didn't do those things, as you two pointedly put out. But they put a catch-all in there, like the professor said, it included his lawyers to say, we disagree with Donald Trump's assessment of the election, so we're going to label it a conspiracy, which is a total violation of free speech and the First Amendment.
Right.
No one is going to convince me or anyone else on planet Earth that Donald Trump doesn't believe he won the 2020 election. He's entitled to that opinion.
Just on that point, again, you're talking to a non-lawyer, okay? But look, why are his counselors not have free speech? What happened to their free speech?
Right.
I don't understand that.
Of course, they also have a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. But you know the worst thing about this indictment? under the terms of this indictment, Jack Smith can be indicted. Let me explain to you why. The statute says the following: if two or more persons conspire to injure and deny somebody the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured him by the Constitution. What if a court ultimately rules that Donald Trump had a right under the First Amendment to make his January 6th speech and to do what he did? Then Jack Smith will have conspired to deny him of that right. That's how serious this is. And Jack Smith also, in his indictment, deliberately, willfully, and maliciously leaves out the words that President Trump spoke on January 6th in his terrible speech, which I disagree with. But what he said was, I want you to assemble peacefully and patriotically. Jack Kemp leaves that out. That is a lie, an omission lie. And if you're going to indict somebody for telling lies, don't tell lies in the indictment. If you're going to indict somebody for denying people their constitutional rights, don't deny them their constitutional rights by indicting them for free speech. That's how hypocritical this is.
Well, that's a great point. Thank you, Alan. That's a really good point. Kash Patel, I'm going to step back. You've been in the government. You've been in the political game. I mean, I just find the whole thing incredible. These are not a series of coincidences. Every time something happens that puts Joe Biden on the front pages for some damn scandal or family scandal, now I know they're allegations, they're not proven yet, but I'm just saying, as the evidence mounts, it just seems like every time that happens, he figures out a way to get his Justice Department and or to direct his special counsels. By the way, he's got special counsels for his own documents. Nobody can find that guy. I don't know what country he's in. He's probably at the gaming tables in Montenegro. But the point is, this is pure politics, Kash. That's what I'm saying. And, you have this thing. It just happened 2 days ago. It just happened. Hunter Biden's best friend gets up there and links Papa Biden with great clarity to potential scandals, to money laundering, to influence peddling. And guess what? The next day, Jack Smith drops these charges, which, and I'm going to quote Professor Dershowitz, look like phony charges. You think that's a coincidence, Kash Patel? Honestly? Really?
Well, Larry, look, it's one of the themes of my new book, Government Gangsters.
Coincidence, Kash Patel? Honestly? Really?
Well, Larry, look, it's one of the themes of my new book, Government Gangsters. In government, there is no such thing as a coincidence. And you've laid out masterfully how the political system has been overtaken by the weaponization of law enforcement at DOJ. There's a two-tier system of justice on display. And you want to talk about coincidences, let's talk about the judge in this case, Judge Chutkan. When I was the Russiagate chief investigator, we got federal congressional subpoena power to go after the bank records of Fusion GPS to prove Hillary Clinton and DNC paid for it. Why do I bring that up? The judge in that case we drew was Judge Chutkan. She recused herself from that matter because her law firm, Boyd Schiller, represented Burisma, Hunter Biden, Fusion GPS, the DNC, and the entire Democratic entrenched encampment. So if she recused herself on that case, how is it that she got off the wheel draw on this Trump indictment? She must be recused from these proceedings if she single-handedly claimed herself she can't be a neutral arm.
I managed to recuse the Boy's law firm in a case that I was involved in because of a conflict of interest. And in that recusal motion, we documented case after case where the Boy's Schiller firm had conflict. In one case, the federal judge in New York said the conflict was so clear that any first-year student should have recognized it, but they didn't. In my experience, that firm is one of the most corrupt firms. They've had more charges against them. They are Democratic hacks, and they are one-sided and biased, and they're very influential within the Democratic Party. And they were the lawyer there on the other
Hunter
side
Biden
of some of these cases while she was there.
And the DNC
she must get out of the case.
She's got to recuse.
The case must be taken out of the District of
Columbia
and put into either West Virginia or Virginia, where at least there's purple, rather than completely anti-Trump one-sidedness on the part of the jurors.
Kash, what were you going to say something? I'm sorry. Were you trying to say something, Kash Patel?
No, I agree with it. It's just that Judge Chutkin came from Boies Schiller, as the professor laid out. That firm represented the DNC, Fusion GPS, Hunter Biden, Burisma, etc. She recused from the case of the subpoena on the Russiagate investigation where the Steele dossier was funded by those individuals. How can she now sit on the very case of Donald J. Trump that launched that baseless investigation? She recused there. She has to recuse now. Finding a neutral and detached arbiter of justice is critical to due process, and Donald Trump is entitled to just that.
Gentlemen, Professor Dershowitz, thank you, sir, so much. We really appreciate your coming back on the show. Kash Patel, you know we love to have you on. It was a great conversation. Hope you'll come back, sir. Both of you. Thank you so much.